I'm Allison at the National First Ladies Library, and I want to welcome you to our first Fun with FLOTUS this fall. This fall, we're going to talk about women who have helped crack the glass ceiling. And you probably thought Hillary Clinton was the first woman to run for president. There are actually a few women who came before her, and we're going to spend this morning learning about the very first woman to run for president. Her name is Victoria Woodhull, and not only was she the first woman to run for president, she was the first woman stockbroker as well, and the first woman to address Congress. So she was kind of out there for her time period, and she's a really interesting lady. We're going to read this great book by one of my favorite kids biographers, Kathleen Kroll, that has really cool illustrations by Jane Dyer about Victoria Woodhull. The truth is, I am too many years ahead of this age. There were wild women in the Wild West and throughout most of history, but the America of the mid-1800s laced itself up tight. Personal ambition in a woman was thought to be evil. Childbearing and housekeeping were her duties. No college was open to her. Respectable jobs were mostly dreary, and any wages paid to a married woman went straight to her husband. If she divorced, she could lose her children, property, and reputation. Heavy dresses dragged her down, with waists cinched tight enough to cause serious health problems. Many male doctors believed all women were diseased and wouldn't examine them. The quieter and more sickly she was, the more attractive. A woman could not vote, serve on juries, or testify in court. No law stopped a husband or father from hitting her, though some laws spelled out how big an object could be used. Law, medicine, business, education, religion, politics, and even fashion all reined women in. It would take someone wild to break free. A woman named Victoria Woodhull tried. She was born Victoria Claflin. Later, she liked to recall her cheerful childhood, the pretty white cottage, flower gardens, loving relatives descending from royalty. In real life, everyone in Homer, Ohio wanted the Claflin family to get out of town. Their rattling shack lacked furnishings, even an outhouse. Victoria was the 7th of 10 quarreling children. Their father beat them, and the boys ran away as soon as they could. At mealtimes, the children roamed to other houses to beg for food. Victoria refused to beg, but one day, when she was 5 years old, she knocked on a door and asked if there were any chores she could do for pay. Rachel, the young woman who answered, let Victoria visit almost every day. She washed Victoria's hair, taught her how to read, fed her, and praised her. After about a year, Victoria arrived to find a coffin in the house. Rachel had suddenly died. The small girl ran to the nearby apple orchard and sobbed. Hours later, she felt the spirit of her friend coming to her, offering her comfort. The years after Rachel's death were very hard. Finally, Victoria's father noticed her true talent, a glorious voice. When she was 8, he sent her on the road as a child preacher. At religious revival meetings around Ohio, Victoria would perch on top of crates and call out, "Sinners, repent! Listen to me, for I know things you do not." Her younger sister, Tennessee, showed unusual talents too. Spiritualism, or the belief that spirits of the dead can communicate, was growing in popularity. Communicating with the dead at $1 per seance, the two girls supported all the other Claflins. It was a bleak life, and Victoria dreamed of something different. By age 14, she was exhausted and ill. She fell in love with her doctor, Canning Woodhull. As much as she hated leaving her sister Tennessee behind, she married Canning and escaped. But Victoria soon discovered that Canning was an alcoholic and was completely unreliable. He delivered both children, a son Byron, born brain damaged, and a daughter Zulu Maud, who almost bled to death at birth. Victoria ended her unhappy marriage but continued to take care of Canning. She read palms, sewed clothes, acted, gave medical aid, and did whatever she could to survive and support her children. In time, she rescued Tennessee. Traveling from town to town as fortune tellers and healers, the two sisters were inseparable. Always, Victoria noticed the hard lives of women she met. She wondered if she could help. Once they hit New York City, the pair made a point of meeting Cornelius Vanderbilt, the richest man in America. Victoria put him in touch with his dead mother and offered financial advice as well. Her ways were mysterious, but Vanderbilt grew even richer. When people asked him for his secrets, he'd laugh. "Do as I do. Consult the spirits." He'd reveal that a certain company's stock was bound to go up. Mrs. Woodhull said so in a trance. He was so amused by her that one day he said he'd split the profits if her next stock tip proved right. It did, and Victoria was suddenly a millionaire. Her dream of helping women took off. She and Tennessee shocked everyone by forming Woodhull, Claflin and Company, the first female-owned American company in the business of buying and selling stocks. Every morning, the sisters rode to Wall Street in a carriage with velvety red seats, white horses, and a coachman in shiny boots. Poised at walnut desks, they tucked solid green pens behind their ears and offered clients strawberries dipped in chocolate. Newspaper reporters went on about the sisters' gorgeous hair and clothes, and sometimes commented that they knew their business. Men and boys blocked the sidewalks, trying to glimpse the bewitching brokers, unable to believe that ladies could deal with money without constant headaches. Each night, the other brokers retreated to a famous restaurant, Delmonico's, to eat and gossip. One night after work, Tennessee and Victoria decided to join them. Inside, they sat down and ordered tomato soup for two. The waiter, instead of serving them, brought the owner, who said he couldn't possibly allow them to eat there without a man, and could he please escort them back to their carriage. "Don't let us embarrass you," Tennessee said. She left the room and came back in with their red-coated driver. "Tomato soup for three," said Victoria grandly. At her fashionable mansion, Victoria splurged on elegant furnishings for her two children and her second husband, Colonel James Harvey Blood, who shared her interest in spiritualism and politics. Neighbors raised their eyebrows when she took in her former husband as well during his final days. 15 Claflins also moved in, and though they often plotted against her, she was loyal to her family and never wavered. Victoria walked at least 3 miles a day, stuck to a healthy diet, and never wore makeup or revealing clothing. She wanted her mind, not her appearance, to attract the attention. A witty hostess, she sparkled at parties given for thinkers and celebrities of the day. Wearing a trademark white rose at her throat, Victoria began speaking out at women's rights meetings. Leading suffragists admired Victoria's efforts. Susan B. Anthony hailed her as a bright, glorious, young, and strong spirit. Elizabeth Cady Stanton praised the work for women that none of us could have done. Isabel Beecher Hooker, sister of author Harriet Beecher Stowe, and the famous preacher Henry Ward Beecher, called Victoria a born queen. Women couldn't vote, but Victoria found out one day that no laws kept them out of public office. And so in 1870, she did the unthinkable. She sent this notice to the New York Herald, quote, "I now announce myself as a candidate for the presidency." It was the wildest, most outrageous act she could dream up to prove women's equality. Now she had 2 years to build a campaign that would get people to take her seriously. She studied history to find women rulers she could learn from. She and Tennessee founded their own newspaper, Woodhull and Claflin's Weekly, and used it to voice Victoria's position on the country's problems. A leading writer composed her official biography as she began the expensive process of getting her name on the ballot in each state. Victoria realized her campaign was doomed unless women could vote for her. So on a national speaking tour a year into her campaign, she became the first woman in history to address Congress. That day, she was so tense that her face broke out in red patches. Tennessee took her hand. Then, in a low voice full of passion, Victoria listed sentences in the Constitution that she argued already gave women the right to vote. Congressmen were spellbound. All the major newspapers covered Victoria's speech. President Ulysses S. Grant invited her to the White House and reportedly told her she might occupy his office someday. During the next local election, she and Tennessee led a group of women to a polling booth. 3 inspectors stroked their beards nervously as Victoria presented her ballot. An inspector said, "I can't take it. I can't look at it." He kept repeating himself over and over as a crowd of men gathered around, laughing. When Victoria finally stepped aside, she was rigid with humiliation at first. Then she promptly gave a stirring speech about women's right to vote. After the failed voting attempt, Victoria's name began coming up in sermons and at social gatherings. Newspapers tended to belittle the campaign as entertaining. They called her women supporters as homely as nutmeg graters. Some people even found her threatening. Harriet Beecher Stowe called her a witch. Harriet's sister, Catherine Beecher, tried to warn Victoria. One morning she invited herself along on a carriage ride through Central Park. No woman with breeding would directly challenge a man, Catherine explained. The very notion was satanic. Victoria listened politely. Then she said, "You are misguided." Appalled, Catherine stopped the carriage and stormed off. Somehow Victoria had more confidence than ever. There was always some power impelling me onward, she said later. By the end of her presidential campaign, she was able to finance and organize a convention for the Equal Rights Party, her most daring dream come true. Almost 700 delegates representing nearly half the states streamed into Apollo Hall in New York City. All wanted to reform society, though all had different ideas for doing so. Newspapers called the delegates wild men and women, strange-looking people. Victoria and Tennessee were 2 Amazons, described as usual by what they wore. At twilight, the candidate was called to the stage. Raising her arms, reaching out to the delegates, she began, Go where we may in the land we see inequality and injustice." She spoke for an hour, her voice fiery, calling for revolution in business, education, politics, and private lives. People charged forward, chanting her name. Then she held up her hand for quiet. "Let us have justice, though the heavens fall." The crowd exploded. A judge from Kentucky leapt on stage to nominate her as a choice for the Equal Rights Party for President of the United States, Victoria Woodhull. Frederick Douglass, the well-known abolitionist, was nominated as her vice president. Even though he wasn't present, he later declined the honor. Men shouted themselves hoarse, standing on their seats, throwing hats in the air. Women waved handkerchiefs, and some, born in poverty, like their candidate, wept openly. Passers-by outside on Broadway were startled by the commotion. Victoria Woodhull beamed back at the crowd and savored the triumph Coming from nowhere, she had united a broad range of people into a new political party to support her as the first woman candidate for president. It was a wild moment in American history, and time would never be the same for women. So Victoria Woodhull, here she is, did quite a bit for women in being the first woman stockbroker, the first woman to run for president. So she was really creative, really different woman. And we have all sorts of activities and questions for you to think about. You can design a button for Victoria Woodhull's campaign. You can take a look at the Constitution and see if there are words that you think support women's right to vote. And you can create your own headline for a women candidate and even predict when you think that a woman will become president of the United States. So we hope you enjoyed our story today about Victoria Woodhull, the first woman to run for president. And please check out all of those activities and let us know what you think. Thank you.